more than just business news, we're news for business people.
Good morning, you're watching Daybreak on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, let's look at the headlines. Asian markets have opened mixed after treasuries slide and the Chinese central bank moves towards a more freely traded yuan. WTI crude holds steady at more than a 3-year high as US inventory stockpiles drop for an 8th straight week. The Telecom Commission accepts recommendations made by the telecom regulator, hikes the spectrum cap from 25 to 35%, also agrees to a longer payment schedule for spectrum liability. The Maharashtra government will allow larger buildings if developers pay a premium. Proceeds from the scheme will be used to fund the Dharavi redevelopment project and also the Bandra-Versova sea link. And Apollo Microsystems is the first IPO in 2018 to open for subscription today. The defense equipment manufacturer is looking to raise a little more than 150 crore rupees. Let's turn to international markets now, and starting with the US. US equities rose to record highs on Tuesday as investors remained optimistic about the market heading into the corporate earnings season. The S&P 500 hit a fresh high, and the index is also enjoying the best start to a year since 1987. Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle wraps up all of the action in Wall Street in this report.
It was another day of record highs for the major averages in Tuesday's Wall Street session. The Dow, S&P 500, and the Nasdaq finished solidly higher. The bullish momentum continues ahead of the earnings season kicking off later this week. Lots of optimism there. Now, relative to sectors for the S&P 500, healthcare and the financials among the top sectors. The banks really being helped out by rising yields. The 10-year yield up for a 4th day in a row. This helped not only the big banks such as JP Morgan, Citigroup, and Goldman Sachs, but also the regional banks. The S&P 500 regional banking index up more than 2%, outperforming the big banks, its best day since early December. Now, we also saw some strength in pockets of retail, such as Target. Shares of the big box retailer up more than 3% on a very strong holiday season. Plus, they were able to boost the full year forecast. Investors liking that, again, with those shares higher. Now, falling on the day, though, the chip sector, the SOX, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, down in contrast to the major averages being higher. Intel, a piece of this. Microsoft did highlight the idea that fixing the Intel chip design flaw could slow some server speed, so that highlights that negative news around Intel. Those shares lower. We also had Qualcomm and AMD down as well. And then finally, one of the most interesting stories on the day, Kodak, soaring on the day, up as much as 147% on the idea, the fact that the former film giant is getting into the cryptocurrency space. They're going to be launching Kodak Coin, which is said to be a photo-centric cryptocurrency that will especially benefit photographers and agencies. In New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
Let's turn to the Asian markets, and they've opened mixed, at least the early risers have. Let's go straight across to Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin for all the updates and what to look forward to. Rosalind, China inflation data, clearly one of the big talking points today.
That's right, and just come out a few moments ago. So we're seeing that producer prices increased by 1.8% against estimates of 1.9% rise year on year, and consumer prices were up 4.9% year on year versus an estimate of 4.8%. So you can see that slight miss there on producer prices, but CPI in terms of consumer prices up by just a little uptick more than what was estimates. And these numbers are likely to fuel the movements today in China in terms of the equities markets. Now, we are seeing that the equities markets seem to have lost a little bit of steam. They've been hitting record highs in the last few days so far in 2018. Right now, most of them trading a little bit lower. In fact, the MSCI Asia Pacific down by 0.15%. Now, weighing on investors' minds, of course, other than this inflation data out from China, will be the overnight jump in bond yields. We saw that the fixed income expert Bill Gross declared a bond bear market. Now, whether whether people agree whether that's actually on the cards or not, we are seeing that there has been some shift in terms of sentiment, in terms of what's happening on the bond market. We've seen equities markets, reach record highs, and this year we've seen valuations at the highest level in almost 3 years, a surge in risk assets. We've got strategists at Morgan Stanley, bull market strategists saying that the bull market equities have reached a stage of euphoria. So it looks like today, in the next few days, could be a bit of a turning point in terms of what happens on the market. So in China right now, we're seeing the Shanghai Composite gaining about a fifth of 1%. The yuan, the POB weakened the yuan fix by about 0.37%, the most since September the 12th, and that sets the reference rate at 6.5207 against the US dollar. Bloomberg had reported a change in the way that China is calculating that daily reference rate. So some movements there as well in the currencies. In Japan, we're seeing pulling lower, down by about a third of 1%, and topics just about flat at this hour. Back to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for wrapping this up for us, Rosalind. Let's turn to the Indian market now, and Darshan Mehta and Akam Vakil, as usual, are here to wrap or tell us about the day's trade and all that's happened in the futures and options space. Morning, guys. Darshan, first to you. Commodities in focus today.
Yeah, it is, because crude is up and overall base metals are down, so that's something that's interesting. But overall, the SGX Nifty is indicating a mild outlook. It's trading with a positive bias now, absolutely flat in trade, down just 1 point, so not getting any kind of cue, so it will be a muted start as far as the markets are concerned. Now, how did the ADR pan out? So that's something that we need to watch out for. So Tata Motors, Infosys, Wipro, HDFC Bank, all of them gained significantly. They were up in trade. What didn't do well? ICICI Bank, Vedanta and Dr. Reddy's were down in trade. So that's the ADR picture as a few. As far as crude is concerned, a big jump in crude overnight. It was up almost 2%. Trades with a positive bias for the third session. The WTI ended above the $63 barrel per mark overnight. So there is a lot of traction that's going on in crude, and extend gains as the US stockpile drops. So crude is doing extremely well in trade at this point of time. The other picture is of base metals, and that's commodities on the LME. So that was rather weak in trade. Now, if you're looking at the base metals on the LME, you could see that except for zinc, which was up almost 1.2%, the other commodities were down in trade. There was significant amount of selling in aluminium. There was significant amount of selling in zinc. I'm sorry, nickel was up almost 1.2%, and lead was down almost 2%. So that's a weak opening that's happening. COMEX copper is trading with a mild positive outlook at this point of time. Even commodities in China currently are trading with a negative bias. So that's the cues that's coming in as far as commodities are concerned. Base metals in China open weak. You name the base metal and it's trading weak, be it steel, be it rubber, be it copper, be it aluminium. All of them are trading with a negative bias at this point of time. As far as gold is concerned, gold trade lower for the third straight session. So there is definitely, some bit of pressure that's coming in on gold. Now, FIIs have sold in almost 300 crores in the cash market. DIs were net buyers yesterday, but on an overall market, FIIs have been net buyers. They bought in almost 1,200 crores. DIs have been net sellers in the cash market. This is the month-to-date figure that we are looking at. Now, as far as the Nifty is concerned, the Nifty gained momentum. It's gained more than close to 1% this month, but the broader markets have managed to outperform significantly. What didn't do well yesterday, the Nifty Media Index was down almost 1.2%. The Realty Index was up almost 2.8%. So there is traction that's happening as far as the real estate sector is concerned. The Nifty was up 13 points. What contributed? The heavyweights, Reliance, ITC. Coal India was one of the biggest movers in trade. What didn't do well? Maruti again continues to bleed. ICICI Bank and HDFC were the other stocks that led some bit of pressure. But Agam, what are the FNOQs indicating?
Sure, Darshan. So we saw the Nifty hang around the 10,600 mark, and that means that we have seen more building up in the put side of O in terms of open interest. When it comes to the futures, about 5% added in OI. Similarly, in the Nifty Bank as well, what we are witnessing is an addition of nearly 4% towards OI. But with the India Volatility Index also edging up higher once again, still short of the mark of 14. The put call ratio, however, has edged higher to around 1.67 as against 1.63. Moving in terms of the changes in open interest, as I was suggesting, we are looking at a further writing in the 10,600 and the 10,500 puts, and more support building around those levels. That said, there was no changes in terms of band for stock futures, but I'm keeping an eye on 3 counters. So PC Jeweler has seen fresh longs building in there, and we've also seen fresh longs in the likes of NCCC. We have about near 9.4% increase there as well. Balkrishna Industries, on the other hand, which moved down by as much as 2%. That is where we are looking at fresh shorts with a 26% increase in open interest. So once again, some of these stocks will remain in focus, and whether or not the Nifty can hold on to 10,600, considering the fact that we have seen the Nifty put call ratio edge higher, Alex.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. Turning to the rupee and the bond market now, and Saloni Dhanuka has all the updates there. Saloni, morning.
Good morning, Alex. So the rupee yesterday weakened by 0.3% at 63.72 levels against the dollar, thereby marking its steepest fall in over 2 months. Now the rupee was largely pressurized by rising dollar overseas and along with higher demand from importers amid surging crude oil prices. Now remember, the home currency has depreciated by a good 35 paise in the last 2 trading sessions. Now on the global front, dollar continued its winning run for the 3rd consecutive day against all major currencies except for Japanese yen. It was largely supported by an uptick in US Treasury yields, which stood at 2.55%, its highest level since March 2017. On the flip side, Japanese yen rose as much as 0.6% against the dollar after Bank of Japan upgraded country's GDP outlook and trimmed its bond purchasing program. Elsewhere, the common currency euro was on track for its 3rd straight decline despite upbeat economic data in Germany. Now coming back home, dollar rupee is trading 6 paise higher at 63.66 levels against the dollar in the non-deliverable forward market, which indicates a flat to positive opening for Indian rupee in today's trade. Moving on to bond market, sovereign bonds declined yesterday for the 2nd consecutive day, while yields ended 3 basis points higher at 7.37%, while global funds increased their rupee debt holdings for the 2nd straight session. They infused close to 1,260 crores according to NSDL data, Alex.
Thanks, Saloni, for that. Shifting to the commodities market, and clearly that's going to be in focus today. Jayesh Kilani joins me now to give you all the updates there. But Jayesh, crude, we're talking primarily about the latest trigger being the American inventories, the drawdown that happened.
Yes, Alex. Crude oil prices overnight, that has surged to more than a 3-year high now. Brent, for that matter, surged about 1.5%, and in morning trade is currently trading above 69 per barrel mark. On the other hand, WTI too saw a 2% surge overnight, and in morning trade we are seeing slight uptick as well for that, and it is now trading above the 63 per barrel mark. Rightly mentioned by you that this is largely on account of the inventory data that is expected from the US. So the API is expected to report an inventory fall of about more than 11 million barrels for last week. Now, in case this happens, this will be the biggest drawdown that the country has seen for this time of the year since 1999. So that's the positive coming in for oil prices. Moving on to the base metal space, most of the base metals, fell on the London Metal Exchange on account of rising dollar and equities. So zinc, for example, slipped more than 1%. After it touched a decade high on supply-demand concerns. Now, the stockpiles or the inventory data on London Metal Exchange, that has contracted to the smallest level that was seen in 2008. So zinc prices are down 1%, while nickel was up 1.3%. That was the lone metal that gained and was the best performer. Lead was down 2.3%, and that was the worst performer on the London Metal Exchange. Aluminium too slipped about 1%. And if you look at the Shanghai Futures Exchange, most of these base metals have started trading in the red on the Shanghai Futures Exchange. As far as precious metals are concerned, gold has seen a decline, slight decline, but 1310 seems to be the support level that it is watching out for, and this is on the back of the dollar index gaining for 2 days in a row.
Thanks, Jayesh, for that. The big news from overnight comes from the meeting of the Telecom Commission that took place last evening, and the Commission has relaxed norms for spectrum holding allowed in a particular circle by network operators. It essentially approved the TRAI's recommendations and has basically approved the raising of overall spectrum holding cap to 35% from 25%. Arpan Chaturvedi sums up the impact of this development in this report.
Well, the key takeaway from the Telecom Commission's meeting was the TRAI recommendations on the spectrum cap issue. Now, what the TRAI had recommended was two main things. One was as far as the total spectrum holding in a particular circle was concerned, the limit was 25%, and the TRAI had recommended that for an individual operator, that limit be increased to 35%. Apart from that, as far as the individual bands and the spectrum limit in that was concerned, that was 50%, but the TRAI had recommended that that should be done away altogether. And instead of that, as far as the 700, 800 and the 900 megahertz band was concerned, a combined spectrum limit of 50% in those bands for an individual operator should be kept, and the Telecom Commission in the meeting held has approved those recommendations. Apart from that, as we have earlier also reported, that the IMG recommendations on two specific fronts, the deferred spectrum payment and the computation of interest liabilities, which had been approved earlier, those also now will, along with the spectrum cap recommendation, will now be sent to the cabinet for the final approval. And that, as far, one of the officials who attended the meeting told us will be done as early as possible. Apart from that, there was also certain other decisions, which was setting up of Wi-Fi hotspots in 25,000 villages of UP for the funding for which will come from the USOF fund. These were other decisions that were taken at the Telecom Commission meeting. But yes, the key takeaway was the TRAI recommendation on the spectrum cap issue, which of course has been approved and now will be sent to the cabinet for their final approval.
Let's shift focus to the primary market now. And defense electronics manufacturer Apollo Microsystems is looking to raise 156 crore rupees through an initial public offering that opens for subscription today. Somit Sarkar is standing by with all that we need to know about the company and its IPO. Somit, the first offering of the year, how does it look?
Yes, it is the first IPO of 2018, and it's Apollo Microsystem for which IPO is opening, and the company is looking to raise as much as 156 crore rupees at a price band of 270 to 275, and at the upper end of the price band, that is 275, the market valuation of the company comes at around 569 crore rupees. Now, the entire offer is a fresh issue, and the company will be using 119 crore rupees for working capital requirement, while the remaining 37 crore rupees for general corporate purpose. Now, Apollo Microsystem designs, develops and sells high performance electronic and mechanical and engineering solutions to defense, aerospace and homeland security. Now, the company has a manufacturing facility in Hyderabad, and as of 25th November, the company's order book was close to 98 crore rupees. Now, in the listed space, Apollo Microsystems has two peers, Astra Microwave Products and Centum Electronics. And when you see the growth rate of Apollo Micro, it has outperformed that its peers. Now, its revenue and net profit grew at a compounded annual growth rate of 54% and 58% over FY13 to FY17, while the margins for the first half of FY18 remained at around 17.7%. Now, if you see this growth rate compared to its peers like Astra Microwave, which grew at a rate of around 17% and 10%, and Centum, which grew at a rate of 27 and 36, it has outperformed by a big margin. Now, if you see the return ratios of Apollo Microsystems, it had remained strong. The return on equity was at 18.7, return on capital employed at 27.4, and return on asset at around 4.8. Now, for Astra Microwave, it was at around 6.4, 7.3 and 4.5. Now, we don't have the numbers of Centum Electronics because the company reported a loss on on bottom line and on EBIT level. Now, if you see the balance sheet of the company, it is not as strong as that compared to its peers, with low book value per share, high debt and high debt to equity. Now, the book value per share is 37, the total debt is 112, while the total debt to equity is 1.5, which is very high when compared to Astra Microwave's 0.4 and Centum Electronics is at around 0.13. Lastly, on valuations, the shares of Apollo Microsystems at upper band is at a premium to its peers. Now, the price to book stands at 7.5, FY18 price to earnings at 39.9, and FY18 market cap to sales at around 2.6, which is at a premium when you compare it with Astra Microwave and Centum Electronics. Now, the only brokerage note that I came across was from Angel Broking, and it had a subscribe rating on this IPO on the back of its strong financials, return ratios, and on the back of the growth prospects that defense sector brings in.
Thanks, Amit, for that. Now, talking about another IPO, British sports car maker Aston Martin is eyeing a valuation of $6.8 billion in a potential IPO. Aston Martin has held preliminary talks with advisors about a valuation that would put it on at par with Ferrari. An Aston Martin share sale in London would cement the comeback of the iconic brand. It would also test investors' appetite for British companies ahead of the UK's March 2019 break with the European Union. Aston Martin is famous for its association with spy movie James Bond and surpassed 5,000 deliveries last year for the first time since 2008. But on to the stock of the day though. Camline Fine Sciences is the stock that we're talking about. Promoters have sold 12.3% stake in the company. Let's head across to Nikki Mirchandani, who has all the reasons why you should be watching for this stock today. Nikki?
Rightly put, that's the 12.3% stake that promoters have offloaded in Camlin Fine Sciences. If you look at the first stake, that's Abha Dandekar, which has sold around 4.7% stake in this counter for a sum of around 65 odd crore. Alina Dandekar has sold around 2.9% stake in this counter for 39 crore. And then you have Vivek Dandekar, which has sold 4.7% stake in the counter for around 63 odd crore. If you look at the shareholding pattern back in September 2017, you would see the promoter shareholding stood at 40%, while the public shareholding stood at 59% for this counter. Promoter has been significantly reducing its stake in the company over a span of 1 year. If you look at the promoter's stake in September 2016, it was around 41.09%, which is now effectively brought down to 40.88 as per September holding. This further offloading will further reduce the stake of the promoter in the company. If you look at the financial, it's not a pretty picture there. Look at the 16-17 sales figure, which is 489,533 crore, and then for the first half is 282, which is fine. Look at the operating performance of the company. If you look at the FY17 financial of 33 crore, the company in the first half of the financial year has made a loss of around 6 to 7 odd crore. The margins have shrunk from 6.20 crore in FY17 to the first half of 2.5, and net profit. Now, this is the main point here. If you see, the company has reported a net loss of around 14.26 in FY17, and in the first half of the financial year is almost made loss to the tune of the previous year.
Thanks for that, Nikki. Moving on to the other stocks in news, Shraddha Babla has a list to tell you about. Shraddha, what are the stocks that we have to watch today?
Hi Alex. We start off with Infosys, which yesterday informed that they've signed an advanced pricing agreement with US Internal Revenue Services, because of which it will result in a reversal of as much as $225 million of tax provision. It will also bring down its effective tax rate by about 100 basis points over the agreed period. So positive news with respect to Infosys. The ADR was also ended about 1.5% higher or so. So we should see some positive reaction there. Power Grid, where the board has approved investment in Tumkur Ultra Mega Solar Power Project Park for about 92 crores. You also have a ET report which has said that Punj Lloyd has begun arbitration against a Libyan oil company, and they're looking to recover about 1,300 crores from the government-owned oil company. So we could see some positive reaction there. Another ET report which says that Bank of Baroda and Union Bank have put over 17,000 crores worth bad loans on sale as they look to provision lesser. So keep an eye out on that names. HIL is another building materials stock that has tied up with Chennai Super Kings as an official partner for the next 2 seasons of IPL. This is mainly to promote their brands with a larger number of customer and dealer base. Nut Biogenes, a smaller company, they've said that the QIP will open on 22nd Jan, and they've fixed the floor price at 468.69. That's a 4 to 5% discount to yesterday's closing price. And lastly, also watch out for Shalby Limited's, this is on the back of its Q3 earnings, weak set of numbers coming in from the hospital provider. Revenues grew by 9%, but net profit fell by as much as 24%. EBITDA also fell about 6.5%, while margins came in almost 400 basis points lower at 22.2%. So we could see some negative reaction there, Alex.
Thanks, Shraddha, for that. Moving on to another big development in Maharashtra. The Maharashtra government is looking to ease the real estate developing rights to fund Dharavi and Bandra Versova. I'm talking about the Dharavi redevelopment and also the construction of the Bandra Versova ceiling. Now, development control regulations are being amended to allow additional floor space index of 0.5 to developers in the island city that would essentially allow them to build larger buildings. Jayesh Khilnani joins us now. Jayesh, what would the impact be on developers considering that at this point there's already oversupply in Mumbai?
So Alex, first let's look at what the proposal is. Now, the government of Maharashtra is proposing to add 0.5 FSI to the existing 1.33 for a premium that will be paid by the developers. Now, this premium that the developers are going to pay will be decided by the government on a time-to-time basis, and it will be applicable only on the plots which have a front road of at least 9 meters, and it will not be applicable for industrial use. And most importantly, this is only applicable for the island city of Mumbai, that is South Mumbai, which is Mahim onwards to South Mumbai. Now, rightly mentioned by you that the funds that they need will be for the Bandra-Versova sealing project that they are expecting, and for the Dharavi redevelopment project. Now, earlier the revenue sharing was split equally. Now the revenue sharing after this proposal, if it goes through, will be equally divided at 25% between the government of Maharashtra, Dharavi redevelopment project, Bandra-Versova sealing, and the municipal corporation of Greater Mumbai. So that's the change that we are expecting, and mind you that this is only a proposal to invite feedback from the various stakeholders.
Absolutely, Jayesh. This is only a consideration, and it's something that obviously a lot of people will be talking about. But let's move on. As many as 4 resolution plans have been submitted to revive Kolkata-based Electrosteel Steels. 3 of these have come from steel companies. Vishwanath Nair has this report.
Not only were bankers earlier confirming this story, but now the company itself has come out with a statement to the stock exchanges where it's saying that companies like Tata Steel, there's Vedanta, there's also Renaissance Group, which is run by Abhishek Dalmia as part of the Dalmia Group, who part of the Dalmia family. Now these 3 people, apart from them, there's also Edelweiss ARC, which is backing a fund based out of Singapore. All 4 of them have submitted a resolution plan in the Electrosteel Steels case. Now this case is important. There's about 13,000 odd crore worth of debt. According to a story in the news today, the plan that has been submitted by Vedanta prices the company at about 4,500 crores. So that's a significant haircut that the lenders will end up taking. It is important because it is the first of the 12 cases where there is some kind of final resolution plan that has been submitted. Buyers are will be negotiating with the banks on buying this company. Now, what happens with Electrosteel Steels will sort of set the tone for the remaining companies, the remaining 11 companies, and then again the 29 companies which are part of the second list, and on how what kind of haircuts they can take and what is the kind of resolution plans that will be emerging in these companies.
Soumit Sarkar is back with the big brokerage calls of the day. Soumit, what do you have for us today?
So good morning, Alex. On the brokerage first, the only brokerage that we have today is on Credit Suisse on Interglobe Aviation. Now they have initiated coverage on the stock with a buy rating and a target price of 1,650, which suggests a potential upside of 34%. Now Interglobe Aviation had a strong run-up so far, and it is likely to get better according to Credit Suisse. Now Indigo has a strong balance sheet and a cost structure with leading market share. Now the air traffic growth, which has seen an upside, will have a more cyclical upside with stronger economy according to Credit Suisse. Now going forward, stronger yields and seat factor will continue, and competition, which is modest as of now, will revive according to Credit Suisse. Now the usage of unrestricted cash for buying airplanes can optimize the cost structure and returns for for Indigo going forward. When it comes to Indigo, the positives are strong sectoral growth, superior positioning, and relatively attractive valuations. And the Credit Suisse is expecting the company's revenue, EBITDA, and net profit to grow at a compounded annual growth rate of 22%, 28%, and 39% over FY17 to FY20. Lastly, when it comes to valuations, they are saying the valuations are not attractive, and it's a good point to entry. And the profitability of the company is very sensitive to the fuel prices, and they're expecting the Brent crude to remain at $65 per barrel.
Thanks, Soumit, for that. Now, we've already broached several topics, but there are also several stories that you should consider reading on the website. I'm only going to go through a couple. The first is a key OPEC minister has warned that the group risks overheating the oil market as crude prices head towards the $70 a barrel mark. The Iran oil minister said that members of the OPEC are not keen on increased Brent crude prices above $60 because of shale oil. There's also another story, of course, on the import of solar power equipment and the duty therein. But that's all we have time for in this edition of Daybreak. All you need to know is up next, so do stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint.